Sahana Vavaturyam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadi Tamastu Mavidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May Brahman protect us. May he guide us and give us strength and right understanding. May love and harmony be with us all. Peace, peace, peace. And thank you for joining us for our Friday night reading. We are reading from the complete works of Swami Abhedananda, one of the 16 direct disciples of Sri Ramakrishna. And we are reading the lecture on the states of existence. This is about the third or fourth session that we've spent on this particular lecture. So we are in the middle of things. And it's about the nature of perception. And so, let's see.
Swami, with the greatest love in the world, I think you invoked that there in the opening prayer. I find that we were still proofreading through page 567.
Oh, really? All right. So, this marker
So maybe the last paragraph on 566 was where we should start.
566. All right. Well, I shall take your. Oh, yes, definitely. Yeah, because we were talked about the wavelengths of sound. Here. And the footnote had to do with that. All right, so starting at the bottom of 566. Then, in the dream state, our mind apparently becomes separated from the connection with the sense organs, and it should be remembered that it is partially separated and not absolutely. We do not hear any sound. We do not receive any sensation of light or smell or touch at the time when we are sleeping. But of course, in that sleep state, there is a gradual going from the waking state to the climax of the sleep. There is a gradation. We go to sleep slowly. We do not fall instantly into sleep. We enter into a kind of oblivion, as it were, and this state remains for some time. In that state, perhaps, when the mind is not completely resting, we see dreams, and these are caused by the impressions that we have gathered from our waking state, and also from the impressions of the various sensations that are left in the brain and in our subconscious mind. These impressions remain dormant. They are all pigeonholed. When you see a horse, the impression of a horse is in your mind. When you hear any sound, it is all stamped in the mind, as it were. The ethereal particles of the mind substance are stamped every time we receive an impression of the sensation. Then the sensation begins. Well, of course, there's been a lot of research done on the brain states, and we have lots of instruments to record things that they didn't have in 1920. And of course, the different stages of sleep are designated by different wavelengths of the brain, the alpha waves and then the gamma and the delta waves, I believe it is. Beta is the awake state. So you have and then you go through these stages of sleep, stage 1, 2, and 3. They've kind of eliminated stage 4. They've just lumped 3 and 4 together. Now the current researchers do. And then you go into rapid eye movement state where your muscles are disconnected from your brain signals. Your brain is actually still sending signals to your muscles to do things, but they get blocked in the brain stem and they don't go through. So that's why you might experience feeling like you're trying to run, but you can't quite run, and that kind of thing. Yeah. So, and this idea about not being able to hear anything when you're asleep, I'm not sure that's terribly accurate either, because of course we wake up with an alarm clock. So certainly you can hear some things, and sometimes noises will get incorporated into your dreams. So anyway, there's a lot more research done, but he's doing the best he can with the research that they had at the time.
This is just fascinating. You know, I do remember that last week we were, I thought, pretty deeply engaged. We were swimming in the pool. You know, if you fly over LA, you see all these little turquoise little rectangles. There's the swimming pools in people's backyards. I thought we did, and I remembered something which it's interesting to me, and I have to think that empirically these things have a great deal of value. We were talking about the fact that we can hear, that is to say, as the Swami is saying, the eardrum is still being stimulated by sound, but we're not recording it in our brain from outside. That's two different distinct parts of sense impression. But there was also the idea that I found just fascinating, that there's something of a bell-shaped curve in which some people, as was being discussed, even Swami Krishna may have mentioned this, can hear things and smell things that most people don't. So the universe that we have decided is the way it is, and the scientists particularly decided that. Their whole criteria of confirmability, because they know they can't really prove stuff, but it's very likely so we'll say, yep, that's the way it is, because of sense impressions only. And I heard that Shakespeare had a very sensitive nose. Maybe that's inferred from the writing, but some people can smell things that other people just can't smell. And see things. Some animals, right, can see the infrared. Is it birds? What? Have you remember what?
Well, some insects. And I think
Insects,
some
I think.
birds,
Yeah,
too.
insects. I was thinking
there's
about
some animals that actually have 4 different cones rather than 3.
Uh-huh.
So they have a different information getting into their brain.
I was just fascinated with his discussion of cones. Rods and cones. Rods we see black and white with in our eye. This is in the retina. I mean, that's where they picked up and distinguished. And then color is the cones. You can see for color. John Dobson used to point out that at night, the cones are most affected, and they kind of fade back. So they're not as actively picking up sensors. Therefore, we don't see colors, you see that. But I thought this was a fascinating thing. For whatever reason, he was always doing this kind of thing. That Dad always related to experience in his teaching. He was an educator. He wasn't just a teacher. And he, if you remember, had the dog whistle one time for the boys in the class. And they said, raise your hand when you can hear it. They all heard it. Then he blew it again. This was the actual thing that happened. And one boy still put up his hand, and everybody laughed. As if he was doing a knee-jerk thing and just got caught on thinking and laughed anyway. And Dad said, nope. He said he was hearing what a dog can hear, but we can't hear. And here's what I think is the zinger about, the real world, the world we live in, and how we have to be jolly about what we can do, what we can, what is given, which is Brahman, and what is everything else. He blew that thing again. He blew the whistle one more time. He went like this. And the boy did not raise his hand. And the whole class laughed again. Can you imagine this Illinois farmer, these New York City boys? What a dynamic it was. It was so much fun. He said, I didn't blow it. So we have to be real careful. Because not only is what we see different than what other people are seeing, we're all seeing different angles of the room, but what we actually hear in quotes, metaphorically, is different. We'll pick out certain parts of what the other person's saying. We don't listen most of the time. But not only that, the words may just actually mean something different to me than they meant to you when you were saying them. And oh, if we could spend days in junior high instead of some of this stuff they ask us to learn on communication, wouldn't it be lovely to realize that we're living in different worlds of perception, different angles of perception, and the whole thing isn't all that darn real anyway. Now, the fun part is to me about this dream thing, Swami. We have a party line from Ramakrishna order in India. It's not the old-fashioned party line, I would like to submit, but who am I to say, in which you have to believe. But there's a corpus, a compendium, a consensus of understanding on the parts of the monks of the Ramakrishna order of what their recent elders have been experiencing. Experience is the ground of anything real, you see. So I don't know. They want us, many Swamis have told me that they just take it for granted that the dreams, that we create our own dreams. Now, I'm just a little, transplanted son in New York City with a scientific dad. I don't relate to that. I don't ring to that bell because I wouldn't sign my name to any script of any dream I dream. At the end of the day, present it to the movies in the morning, the office. Here's a screenplay for it. Just wrote it last night, my dream. I wouldn't do it. Plus the fact these REM moments, I think they come near dawn.
Well, they come every 90 minutes, but they get longer as the night goes on.
Oh, they get longer as the night goes on.
Approximately 90 minutes. Depends on the person. But
they used to think that dreams were just, dreams, here, let's put it this way, our beloved founding Swami, who really, there are lots of Swamis we like. I hope we like every last one of them. Some of them, and each person has his own. We adore. And that's out of our control. So our founding Swami said, and I find this interesting, he was a man of the 20th century, he lived in the 20th century mostly, that we don't know a lot about dreams. So he was, the kind of spiritual son of Swami Abhedananda. He's one of the authentic, experienced Swamis of the Ramakrishna order, and he was saying, no, we don't know that much about dreams. So I find what we're hearing here just absolutely fascinating. Have you heard about sleepwalking? It happens. We had an old fellow named uncle or cousin, I forget, I think his name was Joseph Hunsinger back in the forest. He'd get up, walk a couple of miles at night. That's interesting. And then all of this other business that we have, I think, yes, a lot of impressions even of the recent day before, like carpenter endings, things that were sawed off 2x4s, and you scoop them up and they're in the dream. But they're not limited to that. And I think that we have to realize that our waking mind is the land of our opportunity. This is where Karma Yoga takes over. We struggle to find God, to think of God all day long. Practice, 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 says Swami Abhedananda. And it's this that helps us move toward union with God and the consciousness with the greater consciousness. They say, that in lifetime, human beings have a chance to earn karma points. And when afterlife, for example, if they should go to heaven, they're on a Caribbean cruise. They can't earn any more karma points. Now that's not quite the case, because there are ways that we believe that you can progress toward God if that's, you're headed that way anyway, this loka, that loka. But basically, it's got to be in our waking state, with our conscious mind, that we try, because that's what we have some control over, the intelligent will. But remember, I think, and this is enough for now, that the ego, I was just reading this, arises when we link the real consciousness of Brahman in our mind only with the intellectual faculty of the discriminating will. So we get further and further away from our union with Brahman and our oneness with the conscious mind as we go through this time away from God until we come back again. And we won't do it tonight for your sake and everybody else's, but I actually think that this is the story of Adam and Eve. They got further and further away from consciousness of their being held in the hand of God, the laws of nature. You understand, animals can do no wrong. There's no such thing as bad tiger, bad tiger. But Adam and Eve, remember what they ate? It was the fruit of the tree of knowledge of right and wrong, of good and evil. And along with that came the superimposition of their idea of themselves as separate from God, somewhat. and we got to get back to the garden. I love that statement, Judy Collins, somebody like that, by going forward.
Now, of course, the dream state now, I mean, what he's referring to as the dream state is probably the REM state and the dream state there. But when you wake people up in the other stages of sleep, they may remember something, but those dreams are usually much vaguer. They're not as visual. They can't remember them as well. So the kinds of dreams that are very visual and very experiential that you might have a chance of remembering when you wake up. And you tend to wake up right after a REM sleep. Those are what we typically call the dream state, even though there are things that people might classify as dreams in the other states. So anyway, are you going to read a little bit?
Well, yeah, just one little funny thing here. You know, we're Westerners. This is what we do. This is the problem with the Western mind, but it's so much fun. But since we've really taken quite a time with sleep the last couple of days, I think we'll end with this one. There is a theory, and a hypothesis is an educated guess. And then the scientists check all these things out against the experience of whatever comes to them. There is a school of thought, a theory, I don't know how widespread it is, I kind of like it, that the reason we dream is that when we were little mammals, in the age of dinosaurs, we were there underground mostly. We're descended from moles. Have 5 fingers. Whales are descended from little insectivore-like mammals. And we're sleeping. And we're sleeping at night, but some of us were sleeping in the daytime. It was dangerous. So the idea is that we develop sleep so that we could remain closer to the surface of consciousness and wake up quickly if somebody's coming to get you, particularly if it's big and scaly and dinosaurial.
There's some aquatic animals that sleep with half their brain.
Oh
at a
yeah,
time.
how is that the way they do it?
Yeah.
Wow, can you give me one offhand? Is it a mammal or a fish or something? Fish don't sleep.
Well, I can't remember which one.
Yeah.
I think some of the fish and maybe some of the aquatic mammals do, like
That
porpoises
explains
and
why they
things,
don't drown. Yeah, isn't that fun? Isn't that fun? And then, of course, the brain is apparently renewed greatly, and other things, even your immune system, which is urgently now, we're in the middle of a pandemic, everyone, in case you hadn't heard. The memory, he says the ethereal particles of the mind, that's what the Swami just said, substance, are stamped. The subtle particles, like the electrons, of the mind substance are stamped every time we receive an impression of a sensation.
Now, of course, it seems to me, though, that there's at least some content of my dreams, and I would assume other people's, where it doesn't seem to be part of your waking experience. I've had a recurrent dream of a second building down on that side of the street, over and over and over again. And I frequently say, why aren't we using this?
Oh, that's fascinating.
Because it doesn't exist. But anyway, so, and I've had a couple of precognitive dreams too. About
Have you really?
things that haven't happened yet, and then they happen. So there's some things that are not in your dream state just from your experience, in my experience.
We may have a third session on this one because it is interesting.
Yeah.
The time to do something about real progress is when we're waking clearly. We want to make our subconscious and our conscious minds one. We want that to be on God. And I'll just say this for fun, our Saradesha Prana was so thrilled. This is pretty heavy stuff. These days we're thinking in terms to try to loosen us, to detach ourselves from the world, which is under pandemonium. I call the pandemic a pandemonium. Saradesha Prana dreamed one time, and she was happy about this dream, that she was going to go on to glory. She felt that in the dream. Not that it was really the truth, but that was just what was happening in the dream. And you know what happened, my friends? This is just great. She started chanting her mantra. Happened to be the name of Sri Ramakrishna. And she was so happy about that when she woke up and told me about it, because it meant that it was that close, you see, to her mind all the time, even in the subconscious state.
Well, and it's also said that if you have a dream of a spiritual a spiritual dream, that's like a visitation. That's an actual visitation, a spiritual visitation. So there's another example of something that's not
where we
just.
should leave it. That's
Yeah.
top of the mountain.
Yeah.
You dream of a holy person That is a visitation. And this, all of the elder swamis of the Ramakrishna order, that they concur. The memory is that power by which the mind brings out those dormant sensations above the threshold of our consciousness. She's talking about the subconscious into the consciousness. These dormant impressions exist below our plane of consciousness, and from there they rise. The mind which works in the dream state has the creative power. I'll leave the "the" in. I'd rather say has a creative power. But that's
has
what
creative power. I mean,
has creative power. Let's leave it at that.
That's
Yeah.
another pretty well documented
Yep.
thing, is that people do get creative insights.
My Lord, yes. And colors? Do you have, somebody said some years ago, "Did you ever dream in color?" And I wasn't aware of it. And then holy cow, wow, here they come, just color ever since. And the colors are getting more, they're getting brighter and marvelous, just rich in the color. Whatever. It can create a new form, like a new symbol, over the materials which are all pigeonholed in the form of the impressions. For instance, you may see in the dream state the half man and half horse. These Indians, I mean, they're probably unbounded, you know. You take the leash off, like the dog when you give it a run in the park. For the Indian folks, I'm sure, when they dream.
Sometimes I'm a horse in the morning, but it doesn't mean I'm half a horse.
We're not going to talk about the half of the horse, i.e., a man with a horse's head. But the head and neck is like that of a man. Now, why I say Indian folks, who knows? But the whole world of myth, almost like a dream, waking dream. And the Indian people, for whom their very poetry, their very metaphors are meaningful in that they lead them to an exalted state, have a wonderful story that there were 10 times that God came down to the earth as what they call an avatar. I don't think we need to mix up each other's words. They have the word avatar. That doesn't mean exactly what to a Christian incarnation means. Maybe it does. They say, oh yes, Christ was an avatar. Well, fine, that's no problem. You know what I'm saying? So the point is that a couple of these incarnations were pre-human. There was a fish avatar, right? Mm-hmm. And a turtle avatar, am I right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then one of the grandest of all, half horse and half man.
Half lion.
Half lion. Oh yeah, it was half like horse it was. I'm seeing a lion and a man, but the horse things overwhelmed me. Okay, the mind has created that form.
There is a Filipino deity that's
really?
half horse, half man, who's very much like Ganesha.
Really?
In that he can be a trickster, but he's also the one you propitiate when you start a journey.
I see. So, this is fun. It's almost like the dream state having come into our mental, you know, in the form of poetry or metaphor or myth. And myth is very powerful. I'd like to hear what you feel about that. I'd like to learn what you have thought about myth. You will notice that half of the man's form is put upon half of the horse's form, and the man has created a new figure. This is an illustration, but you will find that there are a great many images which you see in your dreams, made up in that way, and you have a certain impression of a certain thing. That is put in a grotesque manner by the creative power of your mind. As a cartoonist might make up a new figure. Always it has some purpose, and all dreams have some meaning which we may not know at first, or which may not be interpreted by ordinary minds. But they're all symbolic. You have your path through life and experiences, I have mine. I don't know enough about dreams to understand whether Freud and his more spiritually inclined disciple, Carl Jung, with whom we have some interesting connections. He was known to our swamis and vice versa. They think they've got this symbolism down pat. I think we'd probably do much better to analyze the powers of the waking mind, which is frankly what we're trying to do these Friday nights with Swami Abhedananda. Maybe some specialists can do it, but to spend all of our time analyzing the symbolic meaning of the chaotic jumble of the world of dreams which Swami Vivekananda might be the first to say is very similar to Alice in Wonderland, because he thought, told Dorothy, the little girl in the back of the house, in the park, in the open space back there, they used to read Alice in Wonderland. So, oh, this is like real life. But dreams surely are a jumble. Much better, I think, to try to understand our own minds in the waking state and to do something about it. So, they're all symbolic. Those who see the visions, which are like dreams, which will explain them properly, if they can interpret correctly the lines and vibrations and the forms and the colors. I have very little information on that personally, but I'm interested that he would say that. But if the percipient cannot interpret correctly, he would not be able to explain anything. I'm afraid I'll have to say he will. If it requires a great deal of experience and test conditions by which one can be exact and can interpret correctly. Well, the Swami obviously is taken off on interpretation of dreams. Do you know how much we have in our Western tradition? Back to Joseph. Joseph was an interpreter of dreams. And when he was picked up on the road by the Egyptian soldiers, the Pharaoh asked him, please interpret my dreams. Fascinating world to which, with the perhaps more limited Western mind, I really have very little access from science. Now
I
then,
think he's right on here. He's talking about, if you have a certain spiritual development, then you can more likely give an interpretation to the dream.
Good.
He's picking it up on a spiritual.
Well, okay, I can't have any ground of dispute with that. It's just Freud and Jung, but yeah, okay, maybe they like art.
Just your ordinary therapist may or may not be able to interpret your dreams very well.
And I suppose he's thinking that not that he's putting himself in the therapist's shoes, but that the individual who's having the dream may have no clue. So anyway, that's a world of discourse that's interesting. Ordinarily, persons who make mistakes might be psychic, but their interpretation is not correct because their reasoning faculty is not developed enough. They've not analyzed and discovered the correlations between the signs or the symbols which they saw in their visions and the real things to which they refer. So the Swami lives in a world in which people have visions. That's why the East and West have to get together now. Why that's the greatest thing happening in the world. The greatest thing. The correlation of both sides of our temperament, the right and left hemisphere of our mind, the East's world of experience, which is probably 4 times grander than that of the person who is just limited in the Aristotelian analytical side of Western civilization. Okay, so for that reason, many psychics would make mistakes. They may not be fraudulent, they might be in right earnest and be honest, but still they are apt to make the mistakes.
Well, years ago there was a program called the Psychic Challenge, and this one person who actually came in second, if the challenge was about a crime scene, she was right on almost every single time, and she could give detail after detail after detail. And you ask her to do something like match up people with their husbands or the person with their pets, not so good. Yeah, so it was really interesting. Yeah, she could be very, very, and this was really true for a lot of them. One challenge, they would just nail it. And the next one, they just completely blow. And so, obviously they've got something going, but obviously it's not very reliable either. So it was very interesting to see how that played out. And they've never repeated that series. I think that's because they probably didn't want to. Yes. Yeah.
It's yours, buddy.
Oh, okay. So when you go to a psychic and find that the symbols or the prognostications that have been given about you are not correct, there the psychic perhaps is not able to interpret them correctly. He might have the impressions all right, so in that dream state we see the results of these various combinations of the impressions that we have received during our waking state. There are some dreams which bring us in close touch with the spiritual world. For instance, when you may dream that your father or mother or friend or lover who has passed away has come to you and is giving you a message. Such dreams happen, and they might be real. Perhaps your friend or relative, whoever he may be, has really come to you and has given you the message while you are sleeping. Because while you are sleeping, you are away from this world. That is, your mind or egos are away from this world, which is lighted by the sun. The spirits do not like sunlight because it is too bright. The vibrations of light are not agreeable to them, as the vibrations of the spirit world is different. When we withdraw ourselves from the sunlight world and go into our innermost being, we can reach the spirits in that state more quickly than in our waking state. For that reason, this state of existence may be one of the conditions under which we can come in touch with the spirit world and receive the communications. You know, those who receive communications from the spirit world go into a sleep or a semi-conscious state. They do not see the external objects even when their eyes are open, but they withdraw their minds from the external sense organs and go inside. There comes a kind of screen or a veil that drops, and it is a misty or hazy kind of screen that appears in front. But in that hazy screen, the perceiver might be able to notice the particular individuals like the shadows. Just as you are sitting now, and if you have that screen before me, I would not recognize you at all, but I would see figures just like the shadows in front of me. I would be able to go through your body and come in touch with your mental states, and perhaps I would be able to read your thoughts, because your thoughts have these forms. The thoughts have forms, and perhaps I would be able to read them correctly if I have previous experience, and then I would be able to know exactly what you are thinking.
The thoughts can be photographed. You know, we're really on a kind of a sojourn with Swami Abhedananda tonight. Maybe he stayed in the West too long, I don't know. But this is definitely a side trip down to the Grand Canyon. He's discussing, as Patanjali discusses, a whole world, a realm of abilities of the mind which people have, but they're not generally deeply spiritual. So the thing is, the psychic realm is what he's discussing. He actually did spend some time, which was in vogue then anyway, around the 1920s. A lot of people from Europe, maybe George Bernard Shaw, I don't know, people like that, were talking about spiritualism. So the Swami was examining this, but he wasn't caught by it. We've heard all these things why psychic powers are not conducive to spiritual growth. Swami was told, our founding Swami, by someone senior to him, well, if you find that you come upon these things just in the course of your meditation, use it once, like a scientific child, and then don't need to use it again. But this is genuine. It's just not all that deep from our point of view. The thoughts can be photographed, he says. If you hold a sensitive plate in front of your forehead, and if you're allowed to think of a particular thought or an image, that image will be photographed on that sensitive plate. This, as all scientific experiments, could be done again, and if true, they could be considered true. In other words, we don't have the evidence that he's speaking of. These experiments have been made, and they are all psychic experiments. Now that will show that in our dream state, sometimes we come in touch with the real things. They may not be real in our waking state, but they are real so long as we're dreaming. Sometimes, however, the results of our dreams or communications with our friends can be remembered, even in our waking state, if they're very impressive. And if they are of great importance, then we do not forget them.
Yeah, I don't remember any reading about experiments with a photographic plate, but I think I have read, and I'll look this up for next time, where two people that are fairly closely connected maybe meditate together or something, and they'll put them in separate rooms in Faraday cages, and then they'll have one of them think of an image, and then the other one will try to guess which one of a group of images or something they're thinking of. And they're usually, they do it better than chance by a significant margin.
Is that out of Duke University, incidentally?
I don't remember.
Okay.
Could be. And then there are other experiments where they will ring a bell in the presence of one of the persons, but not the other. But the brainwave of the second person will also react. Less of a reaction than the first person had, but both of them react. So there's some connection there that people can get.
That's a beautiful thing, the fact that we're all connected
Yeah.
with the plants and the animals and the birds. Yeah.
But as in the dream state, all the experiences of the waking state vanish and appear as unreal, and the experiences of the dream state appear as real. So in our waking state, all the dreams appear to be unreal, and whatever we perceive with our senses seems to be real. This reality is the conditional reality, but the existence that I have described in the beginning is the unconditioned absolute existence, which is not limited by time or space, and not subject to the law of causation. All these particular experiences which we are having in our waking states, and call them realities, are the conditional realities. That is, they exist in time and space and are subject to the law of causation, and so they last only for a while, like the dreams.
Well, he's back on deep ground again. Yeah. I see, solid ground. The other state of existence is dreamless, is the dreamless sleep state, and that is Sushupti. There we enter when we are in sound sleep, and we do not dream at all. And then there's a long quote in Sanskrit from the Mandukya Upanishad, and something is 5, whatever that means. So, the mind rests there. That is the causal body. And there the mind goes to its causal state. This is fascinating to me. Maybe we'll go into it some other time. It has no particular form, but is like a nucleus of the finer particles of matter, which is something like the electrons, and which receives the ethereal impressions of the mind, finer impressions of the mind, which Swami Vivekananda says is still matter, but fine matter, subtle matter. Mind, he says, is fine particles of matter. All right. That's the human mind, you know, which receive the ethereal impressions of the mind. And the different forces or powers of the mind remain latent. This is kind of wonderful because we have the mind in all of these rather grand royal states, don't you see? Not just something locked inside a bony cranium, but rather a royal realm of many domains and many powers. And I would think that would give one a feeling of awe for God, for the extreme omnipotence, omnipresence, omniscience, the wonderful extension, you could say, of God, the realm of God, the power of God. They are in seed form, these impressions of the mind, and yet there is that existence. I'm going to let you go on with that, Swami.
We do not become non-existent, although our body does not exist in relation to us. When we are sleeping soundly, although we may not have any dreams, still we exist. What is the proof of our existence? We do not become absolutely unconscious at that time, because when we wake up, we remember that we had a fine sleep. When we did not have any sleep at all.
Any dream.
When we dream at all, excuse me. When we did not have any dream at all. Footnote 6, okay. This state has beautifully been explained or described in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. Back to the text. We are conscious of that void and of not having any dream or any disturbance of any kind in that dreamless state, Sushupti. The consciousness of that particular state of existence remains, and therefore we as the individuals who had that consciousness existed. So our existence is not disturbed by the change of the states of existence. That is, neither the waking state nor the dream state does disturb it. And even that dreamless sleep, and even in that dreamless sleep, we exist. So, and I think the important point of this is to recognize that just like our dream world is a kind of show that's created by something, mostly the brain, so is this waking state. It's a show created by our sense organs, and it comes to us in a particular way. And as you say, sometimes different people may perceive things differently. So if we can remember it's the Divine Mother's show, then not our show, then we're better off. And that there's something deeper behind, which is not changing.
This is powerful. This is one of the big senses, I think, of the whole reading tonight, don't you? That the existence state, which we know is the same as consciousness, the same as bliss, Satchitananda, the existence state is more foundational than even the dream state or the waking state, because that's our real state. So that's what never does go away, even when we're in deep sleep, and we know it. So this is wonderful. Swami, I'd like you to continue. Do you want to? How are we doing time-wise?
Oh, we got plenty of time.
All right.
We also had the meeting.
Yeah, but it's only 10 after.
And if anybody like Myron can turn off the air conditioner, I would be grateful to him till tomorrow morning. I'm sitting right under a cold blast of air.
Well, you say that.
Oh yeah. I was a little bit before. I think it was weird. It's good than a cold, yeah.
Well, we just lost our Swami, so I'm going to continue reading for a while. So that existence. Now here we go. Here he is with the big drums and the tubas and the big bass drums. The band is parsing. We heard some piccolos and lovely little things going by at the beginning, piping drum. Now we get the drum. So that existence is a continuous thing. There is no break in this flow of existence. So now I'm so proud of the Swami Abhedananda. I'm back with him, He really is good. Swami, you're on the third sentence of that wonderful paragraph. Why don't you read the whole
From
paragraph?
this,
Yes,
so that existence is a continuous thing. There is no break in the flow of existence. It is indestructible, and you cannot separate one existence from another. From this waking state, you go into the dream state, and then into the dreamless sleep state. And then you wake up, and it remains inseparable. This individual existence is the real individuality, because the word individuality means that which cannot be divided by the waking or the dream or the dreamless sleep state. It remains as an unbroken and continuous entity. Footnote: this unbroken continuity implies an existence which is eternal, changeless, and indestructible. It enjoys the three states of Jagrat, Swapna, and Sushupti, but is never disturbed by those states.
And those states are?
Well, the waking and the dreaming, and probably the dreamless sleep.
Yes, right.
But it remains always unaffected, indeterminate, and unconditioned. The Mandukya Upanishad says, well, it's in Sanskrit, and I won't be able to translate it for you, so we'll just leave it at that.
So it would be chapter 1, verse 3 or something like that.
Yeah. And back to the text. So, even after death, you remain as a spirit, and that is an unbroken existence. The body is gone, because that which has had birth must die. The gross physical body is taken away, but there may be an ethereal body. Footnote: this ethereal body is known in the Sankhya and Vedanta as the Sukshma Sharira. That might be taken away too, but those are only the appearances of the real existence, and there is a continuity of the life existence. So existence can never become non-existence. It is said in the Bhagavad Gita, An existence can never become a non-existence, and that which does not exist can never exist. Footnote. This theory has been confirmed by the Sankhya philosophy. Back to the text. That will give you the proof that a chair as a chair does not exist, but the existence of the chair is the reality. Try to differentiate that. The chair, which is known by its name and form, does not exist. So a chair is really a delusion. It exists as a vibratory state, so long as we look at it, because we can never perceive that chair otherwise. If we analyze that perception of the chair, we can only receive a reflection of the light falling on the chair, and that reflection produces an inverted image upon the retina.
Wow.
And that is carried by the optic nerve into the gray matter of the brain. And there it becomes a sensation.
I just need to salute the Swami. My hat's off and saluting him. Look at that. In 1920, he already knew, whenever they figured it out, that the cornea of the eye, which is the lens, does exactly for light what the lens of a camera does, and that is causes the light waves to cross. And yes, indeedy, what we see with our eye is upside down. Now that is corrected, apropos of Swamiji's understanding that the eye is not the organ of vision, it's part of the chain, it's a structure. The whole thing is the organ of vision, but it's the ones that take the nerves, remember, back to the occipital lobe. Between the inverted image, upside down on your eye, like any lens will do for any light coming through the camera, that's corrected on the way back to your brain. Now, if that doesn't put us in a state of respect for the ephemerality and the phenomenality of the world that we see outside, it's not real. It's not what we think it is. Of course I'm seeing you right way up, Satya. Of course I am. But I'm not. I have to correct it. So the point is, so much work is done by the mind. That some of the moods, these wonderful saints are thinking, it's all done by the mind. What's out there is Brahman. Two little boys in India, our Swami used to tell us, and one argued and another said, show me where God is. You know, the one said, well, do you believe in God? I believe in God. The other said, no, I don't. Whatever that's all about. But the one of the boys says, show me where God is. Oh, no, he says, I've never seen God, the one of the boys said. And the other boy says, you've never told a greater lie in your whole life. So the first boy says, well, show me where God is. And the second boy, steeped in Vedanta wisdom, says, show me where God is not. So that's what we're trying to get at. Sure, the world of the phenomenal world has its importance. They're stepping stones to reach infinity again. But we cannot put our weight on the outside world, which we think is so real, when what percentage, I leave it to you, I expect at least 90% of the outside world is done right here. It's worked out right there with the, all the. Okay, brother, please continue.
The experiments are kind of gross, but anyway, they did experiments with frogs.
Oh, come on now.
And they let's see, how did it work?
Come on.
Yeah, they did something to their optic nerve at different stages of development. And after a certain stage of development, the frog could not interpret the world correctly, and it kept turning upside down because the world would look upside down, so it would turn upside down to get the world to look right. So there's a certain development of the brain, and it happens at a certain stage, and that allows us to learn how to visually interpret the world. It's interesting that the infant, the fetus, grows up in the dark. And yet when it's born, it's grown with an amazing ability to interpret what's going on outside.
think
This
you see
idea
it
that this idea that it's a completely blank slate, and remember we were talking about how he thinks it's just a muddled confusion.
Yeah.
It's not quite that. It's not,
Yeah.
I mean, there are a lot of things it has to figure out, but it already has a preference for faces. If you show it an oval, it has a preference for an oval than it does for, say, a square or a triangle, but it has a bigger preference for a face. It will have a bigger preference for a normal-looking face rather than a face where the nose has been put on top of the forehead or something, or the eyes are in the wrong place. It will look at that more than the oval, but it won't look at it as much as a normal face. It's got all sorts of things built in there already. It already recognizes colors. But other things have to be built in along the way. For example, depth perception. It has binocular depth perception at a very early stage.
3D, right?
3D, yeah. But if you cover one eye, it doesn't use other visual clues for some time. For example, like a rectangle that has one side larger than the other, it doesn't think that that's closer because it's larger. But if it's got binocular vision, then it knows one side is closer than the other. So there are lots of different things that the brain has to develop through. Another interesting one is the depth perception, where they put the infants on a table with a glass covering and lit underneath so there's no reflection on the glass. At the crawling stage, it learns fairly early on not to go over the edge. Not right away. But at a certain stage, it suddenly knows that it shouldn't walk over the edge. I've forgotten how many weeks that is. It's a matter of weeks. Then when it learns to walk, it has to learn that all over again. It'll walk right over the perceived drop-off edge, even though there isn't a drop-off. Their experiments aren't going to let them fall into a ditch. But it looks like there's a chasm there, and once they start walking, they have to learn that all over again. So there's a lot going on in the brain. What was that other experiment that?
I just love this. I
yeah.
feel we're in class.
Oh, they recognize, for example, the voice of their mother. They recognize the voice of their mother. This is a one-day-old baby. We're not talking about, after a week or two. We're talking about after a few minutes of being born. And they did experiments where the mother would read a particular story while the fetus was developing. And it'll show a preference for the mother's voice reading that story over somebody else's voice reading that story, or over the mother reading a different story. So there's visual, auditory perception going on even in the fetus state. So there's the brain is an amazing thing, and there's a lot going on even by the time we're born. Even though we're relatively, compared to a lot of animals, we're not very well, and we're not in very good shape when we're born. We're pretty helpless. But as far as sense perception goes, there's an awful lot going on. Anyway, that's
This is wonderful.
yeah.
This is wonderful.
Now what are
I just feel that we're in class. This realm of what shall we call it? Awareness. This realm, which is much more important just than the physical realm. Let's remember that every skyscraper that we ever saw in any of the biggest cities was preceded by a blueprint. It came from mind. And you know what I want to offer you, Swami? I want to offer, if you see anybody, tell them this: don't monkey with the frog.
All right, continuing. Now, if it can be asked as to where did we see the chair and how can we see it, then it is said that the handling is a feeling of thickness or smoothness or roughness. The color is only that which we can see with our eyes, and the feeling of the solidity comes from the touch. And it is the combination of these qualities that we perceive with our senses which appears to be a chair. But where do we see the chair? In truth, we do not see the chair, as we simply feel the qualities of the chair that exist. We trace the cause of the sensible qualities outside of us and call it the chair. But the chair as a chair never exists. But the chair as a chair never exists in relation to us. So we can never see it. So is the external world. The sun, the moon, and the stars never exist. If we shut our eyes, the sun might rise and set forever. It does not matter to us. It does not exist in relation to us. Then it exists in relation to those who are waking, but we never see the sun. There might be a sun outside of our impression of the sun. The sun appears to us like a small disk, but it is in reality a thing. Is it in reality a thing like a small disk? No, it is millions of times larger than the earth. Then how can we see such a big thing? In fact, we do not see the sun, but we see only the image of the sun. In reality, these things do not affect us all. Only we give the reality to them, because we are possessed of the reality. The chair, that's wording isn't working for me. I don't quite, there's something wrong with the phraseology. The chair is real so long as we are sitting on it. If we were unreal, and if a ghost were sitting in our place, then the chair would not exist. So the existence which is the eternal existence is called in Vedanta the Brahman, and it is the unchangeable absolute truth.
Well, now you see, we've really reached the top of the mountain on this one. And the Swami has come in like a big brass band. The whole band, including John Philip Sousa, is the bandmaster. He's the bandmaster. I don't know if everyone needs to appreciate this in the same way, but I think that because we have an affinity and a fondness, the Swami, over these years of much a shared experience here, that one of the noble souls has made a big impression on us because of what he had, like a salesman, you know, like a merchant in the old country days, coming into town with all these things, pots and pans and stuff. John Dobson. He was here for probably 20 years, came regularly to give 8 lectures, 3 hours a night, on astronomy and philosophy from a Vedanta point of view, from a point of view trying to see modern science and avoid Vedanta. Throw gossamer strands like a spider across to build a bridge. And it's very important that we try to understand the perspective of each with a foundation of existence and reality beneath them both. So he would say things that would just intrigue us. I mean, that the whole study of the heavens was for us an inspirational value because it would raise our minds. And you know, Swami told me, under his supervision too, when John wasn't here, we made more than 500 telescopes here, kids. This is not just academic. None of which was smaller than 8 inches, and the vast majority 10 inches. Huge, from scratch. It means that much to the Westerners. So give them their toys, India, to play with. John, because it inspires us. It has us bring our minds up higher and higher to the cosmos, which is cosmos is an awesome God. And then John would show how existence, knowledge, bliss are peeking through like hints, as Swami used to say, Swami Swahananda, coming through from the absolute beyond this world of appearance and show. The very heavens at night are a sound and light show. But John would say that Jupiter, round numbers, is 1,000 times bigger than the Earth, and the sun is 1,000 times bigger than Jupiter. So he was in the right ballpark, 1,000,000 times bigger than the sun.
Okay, I reread the sentence and now I understand what
Good,
you're saying.
they understood something.
And then we have to sign off. In reality, these things do not affect us all. Only we give the reality to them because we are possessed of the reality. So he's saying that because our true nature is the real existence, we have the ability to see a reality. We can give reality to the things we're seeing outside. So that was a very interesting.
How close are we, Swami?
Yeah.
Can we have a little chatter back and forth?
No,
There.
that's-
Yeah,
we're-
you
we're
ended on a
out.
wonderful, wonderful level.
If just time for the
The
chat.
top of the mountain of Brahma.
Okay. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.